Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. One needed to realize that the person in the reclining chair was Shrek Academy's real boss. At the same time, he was also Xian Lina and Yang Xiaojia's teacher. This man was the master of the Sea Gods Pavilion. His word was absolute within the academy. Even old veterans like Elder Lin and Elder Xian were lower than him in seniority. There hadn't been a single person that had dared to object to his decisions in the past. Xian Lina couldn't bear it anymore and said, "Teacher, it doesn't matter whether it's our soul tool department or the martial soul department. The more one studies a subject, the more energy one needs to reach a higher level in it. Studying in both departments at the same time will have a negative impact on the student. He'll have a broader range of knowledge, but he won't be an expert in either of them. Isn't this the same as wasting his talent?" The master of the Sea Gods Pavilion faintly smiled, then said, "Why are you so sure that he won't be able to study both subjects properly? Actually, all of you have made a mistake. All of you think that the Martial Soul Department and the Soul Tool Department's fundamentals are opposed to each other. However, let me ask you a question. Can either of your departments do without soul force or martial souls? The only difference between the Martial Soul Department and the Soul Tool Department lies in the methods used to attack and defend oneself. Their fundamentals are still the same. Thus, you don't really need to think about this that much. Lina, if you truly hope for Huo Yuhao to become a first-class soul engineer, you must realize that he'll also have to become a first-class martial soul master as a prerequisite. How will he create and control powerful soul tools without enough soul force if he doesn't? At the same time, the rate at which his soul force increases will drop drastically once he gets past rank 30, due to the fact that he possesses an ultimate martial soul. Thus, if he lacks a proper technique from the martial soul department to cultivate his ultimate martial soul, won't his growth be impacted? Xiaojia, the same goes for you. As you can see, Huo Yuhao is extremely talented at creating soul tools. He can create powerful weapons to protect himself because of this. A soul master won't become strong in just a year or two, but at the same time, you can't truly stay by his side all the time, right? When you encounter something dangerous, relying on yourself to survive is the best option. This being the case, why don't you let him become a soul engineer too? Besides, our Shrek Academy currently lacks a first-class soul engineer. Now then, I've decided to let this child cultivate in both schools and to treat him as a special existence inside of the academy. You shouldn't force the child to choose. Rather, you should create a comfortable environment within the academy in order to let him cultivate in peace. All of you have ignored an important fact. What are Huo Yuhao's thoughts? After all, he's only 12 years old. If you pressure him too much, it'll only have a negative impact on his future growth. The best thing to do, at least for now, is to leave things the way they are. Let him keep studying as he was before. The two departments will spend an equal amount of resources on him. As for the future, we're not really in a rush. If he continues to receive excellent marks in both departments' tests, then we'll have truly trained an exceptional monster, an ultimate soldier that's close to perfection. Once they heard the master of the Sea Gods Pavilion, all of the veterans nodded one after another. Their complexions became much better as well. Xian Lina said, "Teacher, what should we do if Huo Yuhao's grades start dropping?" The master of the Sea Gods Pavilion smiled faintly and said, "Isn't it obvious? If that happens, simply let him choose a department. He'll join the department he likes the most. If that happens, we won't need to do anything else. However, Elder Xian, don't inquire about the boy's second martial soul. Though I'm curious as well, I can say for sure that this child has a very kind and resolute heart. As such, no matter what his second martial soul is, there's no need for us to pry into this secret." "I understand, Pavilion Master." Elder Xian nodded in assent. Yang Xiaojia and Xian Lina looked at each other, their tense expressions now much looser than they had been. Since both parties had been in a deadlock, this outcome seemed to be the best one. The master of the Sea Gods Pavilion said, "If there are no further objections, this meeting can be considered over. Xiaojia, Lina, you two shouldn't get in touch with that boy again. At his age, it's best if his heart is focused on diligently cultivating. The less he's distracted by the outside world, the better. Yes. As far as Shrek Academy was concerned, this meeting had settled everything. Huo Yuhao's fate had also been decided. Huo Yuhao received the news from Fan Yu soon afterwards. The academy had decided that Huo Yuhao was now both a core disciple of the martial soul department and the soul tool department. With this, he'd become the first person in the history of the academy to become the core disciple of both departments. As for Yang Xiaozhe's other promise, he decided to not bring it up. Fan Yu urged Yuhao to keep cultivating with dedication. After all, he now had to attend class in the martial soul department during the day, then study in the soul tool department in the evening. He also reminded him that tomorrow evening he had to go and take the soul tool department's advancement test. This outcome gave Huo Yuhao some breathing room. Not having to choose was the best choice for him. The advancement test for the martial soul department's Year 2 students hadn't ended yet. After all, the students of both classes combined amounted to more than 100. It would take quite a while, considering the fact that they had to be tested one at a time. Huo Yuhao was happily cultivated in the dormitory with Wang Dong the next day. They cultivated the entire morning. After lunch, they took a short break. Afterwards, before the afternoon bell rang, Yuhao headed towards the experimental area of the soul tool department. He noticed from afar that Hikaitu was waiting at the gate to the experimental area, waving towards him. Senior brother he. Huo Yuhao hurried over to where Hikaitu stood. Hikaitu laughed as he hugged Huo Yuhao and twirled him around him once. I've heard that you've become the academy's center of attention, Yuhao. It seems that several deans almost got into a fight because of you. Not bad, not bad. Huo Yuhao was surprised. Senior apprentice, how did you know? Hikaitu giggled. Teacher told me. I was forbidden from revealing it to anyone else though. Huo Yuhao relaxed a bit. He didn't want everyone to know about what had happened. If they did, he'd be criticized by everyone in the outer courtyard. His only wish was to cultivate in peace, nothing more. Come, let's head inside. The teacher said that you're going to take our soul tool department's advancement test. Are you ready? Hikaitu threw an arm over Huo Yuhao's shoulders and pulled him inside. Huo Yuhao asked, Senior brother, what's the soul tool department's advancement test about? Hikaitu replied, it's a battle as well. We have to agree with the martial soul department on this. Only actual combat can properly assess our abilities. The teacher has already prepared everything. As for the details of your test, I'm not quite sure. As they spoke, the two of them entered the experimental area. They soon arrived at the 12th laboratory. The laboratory wasn't as peaceful as it usually was. There were currently around 20 students inside, all around the same as Hikaitu. Most of them were older than 14, with some even being 18 or 19. The testing area was inside of the battle area, which currently held 2 students in the midst of battle. Next. The teacher hinted for the next couple of students to step forward. Wait a moment. Fan Yu's heavy voice echoed out. He walked over from another side of the testing area and said, Yuhao, come here. You're next. He'd been the one controlling the portable soul shields in the previous battle. He was able to make them react in the shortest time possible considering his cultivation level. Moreover, he'd been controlling all of the portable soul shields simultaneously. Because of this, he'd been able to keep an eye on the students from all directions. Oh. Huo Yuhao nodded and hurried over. At that moment, the students that had been planning to take the advancement test saw Huo Yuhao. A surprised look appeared in their eyes when they saw him. He was normally always studying with Fan Yu, thus this was the first time they'd seen him. However, this guy looked like he was only 12 or 13 years old, yet he wasn't even a student of the soul tool department. Why was teacher Fan Yu letting him take the advancement test? Fan Yu said, this test is very simple, you just have to fight. Everyone will have their soul tools carefully examined by the teachers, which must be self-manufactured. As long as you manage to destroy your opponent's defenses, you'll have won. I'm using these portable soul shields to protect everyone. Huo Yuhao pondered for a bit, then asked, Teacher, is it possible to fight without the protection of a portable soul shield? Fan Yu was surprised when he heard this. Huo Yuhao said, since this is supposed to be a real battle, having a portable soul shield will impact my performance. Furthermore, I'm sure that I won't injure my opponent. Fan Yu asked, and what about your own safety? Huo Yuhao replied without the slightest hesitation, Teacher, I have faith in my abilities. Fan Yu smiled faintly, then said, Fine. With this being the case, we'll do things as you like. Remember to call for help if you can't block the attack. With your spiritual detection, you'll surely be able to tell if you can't. Now then, go ahead and take the test. Yes. Huo Yuhao entered the testing area with large strides. As he did so, he began to adjust the soul tool he'd personally manufactured. At that time, the students of the Soul Tool department finally noticed the badge on Huo Yuhao's chest that showed his status as a second-rank soul engineer. Was this for real? He was really a second-rank soul engineer. Fan Yu had a kind look in his eyes as he watched Huo Yuhao enter the field. After all, a teacher would always hope for their disciples to be outstanding. It was hard to find a good teacher, but finding a genius student was just as hard. Regardless of whether he was talented or diligent, the strict Fan Yu was extremely pleased. Even if he'd spent a longer period of time teaching Hikaitu, Huo Yuhao's status in Fan Yu's heart had already exceeded Hikaitu's. He could tell that Huo Yuhao's future achievements would far surpass Hikaitu's, Yi Kanying, Tang Suifeng, Ling Shui. Fan Yu turned around and called for the next batch of examinees. 2 male and 1 female student walked up hurriedly and respectfully greeted Fan Yu. Fan Yu said, You 3, go up together. Your objective is to defeat him. If you can defeat him, you'll pass this year's advancement test. The 3 students were all around 15 to 16 years old. They couldn't help but look at each other in confusion and dismay after what they just heard. Yi Kanying blurted, Teacher Fan Yu, are you sure? This fellow classman, Fan Yu furrowed his brows tightly. Did you not hear me? Fan Yu was a special teacher in the Soul Tool department. After the 2 deans, he possessed the greatest authority within the department. Though the 3 students were bewildered, they didn't dare to say anything more. They immediately entered the testing area with their soul tools fully equipped. The proctor revealed a doubtful look in his eyes, and shot an inquiring gaze towards Fan Yu. Fan Yu walked over to him, then whispered, That's my inheriting disciple. I want to test his current limits. Don't worry, this is appropriate. Start. Okay. The proctor naturally didn't argue with Fan Yu's decision. Both sides, prepare yourselves. Huo Yuhao was startled when he heard Fan Yu send 3 students into the testing area. He could tell by their ages that they were at least 3rd-year students and maybe even 4th years. Although a portion of the Soul Tool department's students were those who had been eliminated from the Martial Soul department, they consisted mainly of auxiliary-type soul masters. However, this was still Shrek Academy. There were no weak students among those who had been able to last till year 3 or 4. Huo Yuhao felt like his teacher's confidence in him was slightly excessive. Though he was inwardly astonished, Huo Yuhao didn't plan on retreating. He closely observed these 3 students as he began to formulate a plan. All 3 students all bore badges signifying their soul engineer ranks. They were all class 2 soul engineers just like him. Start. Following the teacher's shout, the 3 students facing him made a move simultaneously, and their soul rings rose from their feet. The eldest of the 3, Yi Kanying, had 3 yellow soul rings, whilst the other 2 had 2 yellow soul rings each. They quickly raised their arms as they released their martial souls, and a flash of light erupted as they activated their soul tools. In his current situation, where he was fighting against a team of 3 people, which included a soul elder by himself, Huo Yuhao wondered whether he had any chance at all. In a situation like this, he could only win if he had the element of surprise. 2 white soul rings suddenly rose from his feet, and his second soul ring flickered slightly. Afterwards, his body noiselessly became somewhat illusory, but the 3 students he was facing didn't notice. Immediately afterwards, a scene that astonished them occurred. A black, 1.5 meter long metallic tube appeared on Huo Yuhao's shoulder, then instantly shot out an intense ray of white light. Not to mention the 3 students Huo Yuhao was facing. Even the proctor was stunned by the scene in front of him. He was about to call for them to stop, but Fan Yu placed his hand on his shoulder, causing him to swallow the words he'd been about to say. What was the metal tube? All of the students in the Soul Tool department had seen it before, but none of them had used it besides Hikaitu. It was a stationary soul cannon. Stationary soul tools were renowned for their might, and though they didn't need too much soul power to be activated, it was extremely hard to control them. Because of this, even two-ringed soul grandmasters were able to use them, albeit with difficulty. However, each cannon shell was extremely expensive. A single shot cost over 100 gold soul coins. The academy hadn't even implemented a course for using it. However, even if a person had never eaten pork before, they still would have seen a pig in real life in the past. When students entered the soul tool department, the first lesson they had to attend involved observing the might of a stationary soul tool. The quickest of the three was Tang San. His second soul ring flickered as a shadow suddenly appeared beside him. Immediately afterwards, he sped up and crossed the distance of 10 meters with a single leap. A faint smile appeared on Huo Yuhao's face when he saw this. Beneath the astonished gazes of the spectating students, the stationary soul tool that had clearly begun its firing sequence soundlessly disappeared. Afterwards, he slid forwards in a spectre-like manner towards the quick Tang San. Two blue lights appeared on his ankles as he sped up, causing his speed to quickly reach Tang San's. Tang San suddenly threw himself to the ground and curled himself into a ball. He then pushed his soul power to the limit, causing a layer of light to envelop him. This was the portable soul shield he'd personally created in order to defend himself. However, the explosion he'd expected didn't arrive, leaving him astonished. Everything behind him seemed to be completely silent. Tang San was stunned. Just what was that? Why didn't the stationary soul cannon make any noise? At that moment, he subconsciously raised his head in order to see what had happened. As soon as he did so, however, he saw a warm and smiling face in front of him. Though the defensive abilities of the portable soul shield wasn't bad, it was better suited towards long-range attacks. In other words, it was better used to defend against soul power. Its defensive capabilities against physical attacks weren't very good. A dagger that flickered with an incandescent light noiselessly penetrated Tang San's shield. The instant he finished raising his head, the blade of the knife reached his eyes and softly tapped his head. Afterwards, the smiling face disappeared. Tang San eliminated. The proctor's voice rang out. This was just the way it was. If Huo Yuhao had taken advantage of the opportunity he'd had to attack him, he would have been cleanly stabbed by the white tiger's dagger. When they heard that Tang San had been eliminated, the other two knew that they'd been duped. As students of Shrek Academy, they'd trained in the academy for many years. Their battle experience was relatively plentiful, thus they didn't bother to think about how Huo Yuhao had tricked them. On the contrary, they simultaneously launched attacks towards him. The soul tools they used to attack him were both placed on their arms, and were both similar. There was a golden box on each of their arms, which when activated, 3 thin, golden tubes would simultaneously spit out a ray of white light. This was a Class 2 soul tool known as the Soul Light Ray. The principle behind it was to compress the user's soul power via the use of the formation located within the core of the soul and then fire it out. It had a relatively decent amount of destructive power. There were many ways to examine the strength of a soul tool, but the most important factors taken into consideration were its destructive power, attack range, and attack radius. The Class 2 Soul Light Ray's attack could reach 100 meters, and its destructive power was roughly equal to that of a long-range soul skill from a soul grandmaster. Yi Kanying and Ling Shui simultaneously made their move as they fired 6 light rays each. Though they weren't very well coordinated with each other, they were both extremely familiar with the way a soul engineer fought. The 12 light rays encapsulated an extremely large area and sealed off Huo Yuhao from evading their attacks. However, the instant they fired their soul light rays, they felt themselves go absent-minded for a brief moment. This caused their attacks to deviate from their intended targets slightly. At this moment, they were about 30 or so meters away from Huo Yuhao. Though their attacks had only deviated by slight amount, it exponentially increased the time they took to reach him. Huo Yuhao immediately activated the Ghost Shadow Perplexing Tracks, which caused his figure to flash slightly. He accurately found a place where the 12 light rays wouldn't reach him, thus causing their attacks to harmlessly pass him. At the same time, Huo Yuhao raised his arms. The soul tools on his arms were identical to those of Yi Kanying and Ling Shui. They were both black, wrist guard-like pieces of metal that had been fastened to his arms. The metal boxes opened following his muscle movements, which caused 3 tiny tubes to reveal themselves on each of the 2 wrist guards. Yang Kanying and Ling Shues immediately released their Class 2 portable soul shields in order to defend themselves. Once a soul light ray had been fired, it would enter a short cooldown period that would prevent it from being fired repeatedly. 6 bolts of lightning shot towards Yi Kanying and Ling Shues. However, they didn't have trails of light following them. When the 6 white streaks of light struck their shields, an astonishing scene occurred. White ripples began to appear on their shields, until immediately afterwards something actually drilled through them. The two of them felt their arms shake before the hands they'd raised were suddenly forced away. At the same time, they heard a snap, followed by a grey mist that covered their eyes and blocked their line of sight. Just what sort of soul tool was this? Yi Kanying and Ling Shues were simultaneously flabbergasted. However, as soul masters, they didn't just possess soul tools, they also had their own soul skills. Ling Shues hurriedly retreated while simultaneously releasing a large patch of snow from her body that both blocked Huo Yuhao's line of sight and dispersed the grey mist around her. Yi Kanying's reaction wasn't slow either. His second soul ring lit up, which caused his body to shake and 3 shadow clones to appear. His martial soul was his shadow. Their arms had been knocked away, thus they couldn't fire their soul light rays for a brief period of time. Furthermore, their soul shields had been broken. Because of that, they chose to defend themselves while they attempted to confuse their opponent. In the span of their short collision, Huo Yuhao had actually managed to dominate the entire field, despite being placed in a 1v3 scenario. Who would have expected this before the test had started? The light beneath Huo Yuhao's feet lit up again, which caused him to shoot forward. At the same time, a ball of light on his back lit up, which caused the light beneath his feet to grow more intense. A Class 2 thruster could instantly increase a soul master's speed in a single direction for a brief moment, and the soul tool below his feet was a speed-varying thruster. He hadn't even been a soul engineer for a full year yet. In fact, he'd mainly directed his efforts towards creating soul tools that increased his speed in order to combine them with his spiritual detection. Because of this, the soul tool on his wrist didn't have sufficient attack power. At that moment, Huo Yuhao took advantage of the fact that his two opponents were currently going all out to both defend themselves and dodge his attacks to rush out at full speed. At the same time, the 2 soul rings around his body suddenly changed to a single one. The 2 parties had originally had a distance of 30 meters between them, yet Huo Yuhao was able to appear right in front of them in the blink of an eye using this explosive burst of speed. Yi Kanying and Ling Shues had been put into a somewhat sorry state by Huo Yuhao's grey mist. Before they were able to vanish completely amidst Ling Shues' snow, he'd already reached them. The 2 were greatly astonished when he appeared in front of them, revealing the weakness that was their unfamiliar cooperation. Yi Kanying hurriedly dashed to the left, while Ling Shues quickly retreated backwards. They were instantly separated because of this. All of the snowflakes that Ling Shues had released instantly fell to the ground without any prior warning, astonishing her. As a result, the barrier between her and Huo Yuhao completely vanished. At the same time, the full-speed Huo Yuhao appeared in front of her and reached for her with his crystalline, diamond-like hands that shone with splendor. Ling Shues subconsciously lifted her hands. In her moment of panic, she was only able to release her soul light ray. 6 rays of light immediately shot towards Huo Yuhao like bolts of lightning. At that moment, a strange scene occurred. The 6 blazing beams of light from Ling Shues' soul light ray unexpectedly scattered in 4 different directions. As it turned out, his hands had been in just the right place to block Ling Shues' soul light rays. The 6 rays of light had instantly been reflected the moment they'd come into contact with his hands. Afterwards, Huo Yuhao grabbed Ling Shues' hands. Concentrated Soul Cannon. This was the strongest soul tool available to low-ranking soul engineers. After focusing their soul power into a formation array for a short period of time, a soul engineer could release a powerful attack. Unlike the soul light ray, the concentrated soul cannon had a siphoning effect. In other words, it would expedite the absorption of a soul master's soul power. Thus, though it was powerful, its soul power consumption was just as large. Normally speaking, a single shot from the concentrated soul cannon would drain a soul master by a third of his soul power at the very least. The concentrated soul cannon had a single disadvantage, which lay in the fact that it had a short attack range. It could normally only lock onto an opponent within a 10-meter range. If they were any further away, both its strength and accuracy would progressively deteriorate. Yi Caning's martial soul was his shadow, which made it an extremely strange martial soul. A martial soul like his was relatively decent at assisting him as a soul engineer, but it was unfortunate that his opponent was Huo Yuhao, whose martial soul perfectly countered his. Huo Yuhao's spirit eye's spiritual detection would cause all illusions to vanish. Huo Yuhao didn't even bother with the concentrated soul cannon shots to his left and front. He immediately charged towards Yi Caning with his right hand raised, then grabbed the genuine concentrated soul cannon shot with his right hand. Afterwards, Yi Caning unexpectedly lost control of the left cannon shot. It didn't explode, but rather was flung by Huo Yuhao towards him. Furthermore, he'd even used the Tang sect's arrow-throwing technique. Stunned, Yi Caning was only able to activate his Class 2 Soul Shield in time to block Huo Yuhao's attack. At the same time, he released his third soul skill, causing a black shadow to emerge from his body and attempt to help him withstand the concentrated soul cannon shot. Despite this, Yi Caning's body was flung away with a violent explosion, but was caught midair by the proctor. The intense vibrations that came from the attack caused Huo Yuhao to retreat a few steps backwards, before he was able to regain his footing. Huo Yuhao was inwardly astonished. This concentrated soul cannon's so powerful it seems that I should make one for myself. Yi Caning had clearly sent out a shadow clone to block the blow in addition to his Class 2 Soul Shield, yet he'd still been sent flying. Furthermore, he'd unexpectedly fainted as soon as the proctor caught him. The might of this attack was comparable to the all-out blow of an assault-type Soul Elder. Huo Yuhao was so astonished by the power of the attack, that he hardly realized that the spectating students were all looking at him with flabbergasted expressions on their faces. Even Fan Yu hadn't expected Huo Yuhao to deliver such a perfect performance in his test. In reality, a Class 2 Soul Engineer's participation in the advancement test was a mere formality. Their regular tests, in other words the creation of their soul tools, were more important to them. This was especially true for their achievements in the field of formation array carving. It had been a 1v3 match, yet he'd achieved a flawless victory. He'd started the match off by using his imitation to fake the activation of a stationary soul tool, had suppressed Lingshue's snow, then blocked the soul light ray using the tyrannical Ice Empress pincer, before finally freezing and reflecting Yi Caning's concentrated soul cannon back towards him. Regardless of whether it was his achievements in combat, his decision-making skills, or his usage of his martial soul and soul tools, Huo Yuhao was truly flawless. Furthermore, the soul tools that he'd fired from his arms had caused Fan Yu to smile slightly. Huo Yuhao's reasoning was actually very simple. Why did a stationary soul tool always have to release a powerful cannon shell? Doing it that way would indeed generate a powerful attack, but its production costs would be extremely high. If he could combine the creation techniques of soul tools and the Tang sect's hidden weapons to create a stationary soul crossbow, he'd be able to incorporate both the driving force of a soul tool and the mechanics of a crossbow into his attacks. Doing this would allow him to fuse material attacks and energy-based attacks together, and would let him use different arrows based on the situation. Wouldn't that make his attacks much more flexible? His line of reasoning was extremely beneficial to the soul tool department. This was also the reason that Fan Yu liked him so much, and was also the main reason why the soul tool department was as adamant as they were on having him stay with them. He was simply too talented in the field of soul tool creation. Fan Yu gazed at Huo Yuhao, who'd arrived in front of him, and couldn't help but sincerely say, "Kid, you're truly the hope of the soul tool department." Rather, I meant to say that the coordination between your soul tools and your martial soul were absolutely perfect. You passed the test. Ling Shui was still shivering in Fan Yu's embrace when he said this. Even though she'd only been in contact with the Ice Empress pincer for a short moment, the extreme cold had almost turned her into a block of ice. The ice crystals on her body made it impossible for her to move for the time being. She did her best to revolve her soul force. With Fan Yu's help, she managed to regain her strength. She gazed towards Huo Yuhao, and besides curiosity, fear was present in her eyes. This was the first time she'd ever felt such a terrifying cold. She felt like her snow could almost be considered warm compared to it. The Ice Empress pincer was a powerful soul skill that the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion had bestowed onto Huo Yuhao. Even though he couldn't display its full might, the special characteristics of the skill were still present. The Ice Empress pincer's primary effect would strengthen both of his hands and forearms, making them as hard as a 10,000-year-old block of thick ice. In addition to this, the diamond-like ice crystals on his body had a powerful refractive ability. The Ice Empress pincers themselves could be regarded as a powerful weapon. One need to realize that the strongest parts of the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion's body were her pincers and her tail. The soul light ray hadn't been able to harm Huo Yuhao for this exact reason. It had been reflected by the crystals. Besides making his body extremely sturdy, the skill also granted him great strength. The Ice Empress pincer also had the ability to increase Huo Yuhao's arm strength by an extremely large margin, to the point that it wasn't one whit inferior to Dai Huobin when he was under the influence of his White Tiger martial soul. At the same time, these two skills were very similar to the mysterious jade hands from the Tang sect. As such, they could complement each other. Anybody that made the mistake of treating the Ice Empress pincers as a regular first-ring soul skill would end up exactly like Ling Shui and Yikanying. Aside from these two special characteristics, there was also the extreme cold. As an ultimate ice martial soul, the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion had also bestowed an attribute of extreme cold to every single skill Huo Yuhao possessed. This extreme cold had in turn inherited the overbearingness of the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion. Moreover, its power would increase along with Huo Yuhao's cultivation and his body's capabilities. After this battle, all of the students of the Martial Soul Department were extremely curious about Huo Yuhao. Was this really the power of a student with a mere 10-year White Soul ring? Moreover, from beginning to end, his soul tool had done nothing other than increase his speed. Fan Yu looked towards the students and said, "All of you should have seen the fight just now. Yi Kanying, Tang Suifeng and Ling Shui, even though the three of you lost, Huo Yuhao's circumstances are also a bit special. Therefore, you'll be given an opportunity to retake the test later, and your score will be reset. Now then, let me give you a brief introduction." Fan Yu then pulled Huo Yuhao in front of him and continued, "His name is Huo Yuhao, and he's my personal disciple, just like Ikai too. Furthermore, he's exceptionally talented at creating soul tools. For this reason, he's also a core disciple of our soul tool department. However, due to special circumstances, he'll still be studying at the Martial Soul Department for now. Yuhao, all of these students are the same as you, Class 2 Soul Engineers." Huo Yuhao hurriedly bowed and greeted them, "Everyone, I'm pleased to meet you." The students also greeted him one after another. Those that were jealous of him far surpassed those that admired him, mainly due to his young age. From the battle just now, they discovered that he was the strongest amongst all of the Class 2 Soul Engineers. Even a Soul Elder hadn't been his match. This battle, just now, had also been a great inspiration for Huo Yuhao. Soul tools could greatly help him overcome his shortcomings. Deep in his heart, he thought that, if he had enough time to create some Class 2 soul tools, he wouldn't even need to be afraid of facing someone like Dai Huobin in a one-on-one battle. At that moment, he'd also begun to realize the might of the 4 skills the Sky Dream Iceworm had bestowed upon him. After introducing him, Fan Yu let Huo Yuhao go. He also gave him a day of rest. They would meet the day after tomorrow in the evening, where they would continue studying together in the testing area. After bidding Fan Yu and Hikaitu farewell, Huo Yuhao returned to his dorm room. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Wang Dong looking at something with a very excited look on his face. "What's up? How come you're so happy?" Huo Yuhao moved closer. Wang Dong raised his head and shot Yuhao a look. "Did you pass the Soul Tool Department's advancement test?" Huo Yuhao giggled as he said, "Of course I did. In fact, I discovered that fighting with a soul tool is much easier than without one. The consumption of soul force is also smaller compared to purely using soul skills." "What are you looking at?" He moved closer when he was done speaking, then snatched a bronze-like red paper from Wang Dong's hand. "Treasure Appreciating Auction." "What's that?" Huo Yuhao glanced over the red paper. On it, Huo Yuhao saw that Shrek Academy's core students were invited to the Treasure Appreciating Auction to take a look at the goods that would be on display. Wang Dong smiled, then turned and sat down. He excitedly explained, "I did some research. This Treasure Appreciating Auction is something that was created for our Shrek Academy. However, it's been divided into different categories. For example, this section is specifically aimed towards us core disciples." Huo Yuhao ill-humouredly replied, "Explain yourself clearly. I didn't understand anything you just said." This video will end here. Thank you for watching.